stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
First item on the agenda is to approve the minutes for December 13, 2019 TPB meeting.
Motion accept.
Have a motion, is there a second?
Second.
Have a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Item, read the next item, please.
Item 2 is to approve consulting agreement with the travel demand model between Cambridge Systematics and the El Paso MPO.
This is listed as my item, however, I would ask Mr. Caldwell.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Eduardo Calvo here, Executive Director of the MPO. So we bring this item to you. As you all know, the MPO, through the City of El Paso's Purchasing Department, we carried out a procurement process to select a consultant to develop the new travel demand model, which is, as you all know, it's one of our key tools for analysis. So we went through the procurement, all the different steps, and we bring this contract to you for final action. Before we go there, we have a presentation here on the TDM in general, so that you know what, you better understand what we're doing. And Salvador Gonzalez from our staff is going to present this.
Good morning, Salvador Gonzalez, El Paso MPO. Can we go to the PowerPoint presentation, please? It's a brief presentation that intends to give you a summary of what we're attempting to do with the new TDM. That is a 2017 base year, in addition to forecast years. Okay. The very basics, a TDM is a travel demand model, and this is a computer tool. We have the major arterials and streets in our area being modeled with this computer tool, and this is to travel demand model. Anyway, for this, we use this tool for transportation planning and project evaluation and program. For this, it's really important, or we use as input demographic data, employment and population are really important inputs to this, and so we divide our MPO area into small zones, if you may, and so we need to have good information on population and employment, and we need to validate for this model using saturation counts. These counts are provided by TxDOT, and the most recent ones are 2017, so in this case we would be able to validate for year 2017, and thus we need to develop demographics for that year as a base year. And for validation, again, we have these counts. We have around 500 counts all over the MPO area. And we use this as a check once we have developed the model, once we have estimated flows throughout the network. We check against these counts for, in this case, for year 2017. So we would have a base year 2017. That means that we need demographics for that year, but also we need to forecast for future years. In this case, we'll be developing forecast year 2022 from 27, 30, 32, 40, and 50. In terms of scheduling for the development of this new TDM, this is brief version of the schedule. We have we have 6 tasks for the TDM. The first one being developing a project management plan, and then the second one actually developing the demographics. Very important task. Then 3 to 6 is actually the TDM calibration, then validating against accounts, then developing a script for use by, of course, MPO staff, but also by TechStop and different consultants. And then going on task 6 to develop travel forecast for future years. We will have monthly progress meetings, and it'll take about 2 to 3 weeks for review of each of the subtasks. There will be 3 milestone dates. The first 4 tasks, which will be needed for the validation, need to be done by March 31st, 2021. That is next year. So we're talking about more than a year, 14 months, to having this base year. So with this base year, we actually have a working model in our hands. Then it'll take about 3 to 4 months to code projects into that tool, to the TDM, and then we'll have time to actually run all of the forecast here. So by September 30th of 2021, we should have a full TDM in our hands. A final task, which will take a good portion of 2022, is the development of the international component. For this task, we will be joining both TDMs of Juarez and El Paso. We would have micro simulation of each of the ports of entry in our MPO area, and then with this, we'll be able to actually forecast transborder travel. So, highlights for this new TDM. First of all, demographics. We're developing a full set of demographics for the base year and forecast years using a verified process. So in addition to the technical methodologies to develop this, we will be requesting or having meetings with different stakeholders all over the MPO area to review the demographics developed by the consultants. Another important aspect of the new TDM is that we will be using cell phone data, what we call big data, which will complement surveys being done here in El Paso. Also, we will have a destination choice. It's a very important element or sub-model. It's an addition to our model. We should improve the precision of our TDM. We will also enhance the mode choice capabilities for DRT and LRT, as well as have a bicycle infrastructure mode as well. And finally, as I explained already, we will have the capacity to forecast transborder travel. And this, of course, is within the schedule, the overall schedule of the 2050 MTP. So it does fit, and of course we need to be really careful with the timing, so we can meet the MTP. I think that's the last slide. I don't know if there are any questions or comments.
Question. But it only asked this because the development of the has been an issue in the past. And there is a submittal deadline for this, is that correct? Or it goes into the plan that does require an approval process, right?
Right, so,
And in the past, we have had issues making that deadline.
I think what you're referring is meeting the deadline to show conformity for the new plans.
Conformity
Right,
deadline for-
right.
And
Yeah.
he has struggled with that in the past.
Well, so the travel demand model is one of the initial steps. What Salvador is showing in there is that the development of the travel demand model needs to fit in the development of the next long-range plan. That long-range plan needs to go through the conformity process, which is, making sure that we're meeting all the air quality, requirements, that being that we're in non-attainment. And that's what drives the 4-year clock. So I think we've mentioned it, throughout the year that the next plan has to be approved no later than November of 2022. That's the drop dead deadline. So we've been working backwards to make sure that we take all of the steps, and the TDM is one of the initial steps, make sure that it fits within the entire timetable. So, we're good. I mean, 2022, seems like a really far away, but in this such a bureaucratic process of conformity and all that, things take a really, really long time. So our schedule was developed to make sure that we meet that. Now the travel demand model, it being that it's a new model, also has a 10-year shelf life. And again, this is all because of air quality restrictions. So the current base year model that we have today is a 2012 model, right?
Right.
So technically that model is good through 2022. So in between those 10 years, we need to develop another base year model, and that's why this one is a 2017 model, which means that, as Salvador explained, we have the saturation counts, which are regional counts, vehicle counts throughout the region that we use to make sure that the model is working correctly with 2017 data, right? But that is the latest set of saturation counts that we have. However, the new demographic data that we're going to be developing under this new travel demand model is obviously current data. That's going to be the latest and greatest in 2020. So that data, that demographics for the 2020, for our current situation, then we'll be forecasting how that population and employment centers and households and all those good things are going to be being distributed within the region, and that's going to be one of the main drivers for the travel demand model future forecast. Again, I don't know if I answered your question, but as far as the deadlines, yes.
Well,
We've
that's
gotta
the main
meet the
concern
deadlines.
in this board would be that the deadlines, that we meet those deadlines as we approach.
Absolutely. Another thing that I'd like to emphasize is that for this exercise, we're doing demographics, but we're also doing the binational element of the travel demand model. That it is technologically, I mean, we are so excited that we have the opportunity to do it this time, because what it really is going to allow us is to be able to model both Juarez and El Paso with a single model, right? And then, of course, for legal purposes on the El Paso side, well, we have to disconnect Juarez, and then, the ports of entry become external stations as it always has always been. But it's going to give us a much more, the ability to model more in more detail the cross-border patterns, where people and trucks and all that are starting their trips in Juarez and where they're going in El Paso, and vice versa, southbound as well. So that's, I don't think anybody has really done that, maybe in San Diego with Sandag and in Tijuana. Do you know?
Yes, they have. It's very basic though.
So again, when we talk, and we'll talk about the border master plan later on, but once we're going to be competing against the other border regions within the state of Texas, and well, at the national level, but more specifically in Texas. So this is going to give us the ability to provide better information supporting our projects when we go and compete against Laredo and the Valley and so on. So we're very, very excited about this model.
in terms of this contract with Cambridge, does this take us through to acceptance, or what is the end goal of the contract? I
Right,
mean,
so,
what is their responsibility to the board?
well, the responsibility of Cambridge is to deliver the model based on the scope of work that they proposed.
But not necessarily assistance through acceptance of conformity,
Not through conformity,
not through
No.
conformity. So this is just about strictly development of the contract.
yes.
So if there's issues with it, my point being, if we have issues with approval of the plan, but do we have any way that is Cambridge still going to be involved to help fix it?
Yeah, and
Yes, they will be involved. After they finish, we have time reserved as technical assistance from them if there are any issues with the actual model.
So,
Yes.
and that's just the contractual.
yes, but again, they are tasked to develop the tool itself. How we use it, I mean, they will be there to, if we have issues with the tool itself, as we use it to develop the plan and the future forecast and all that, but the responsibility to develop the plan and all that, that's not theirs, that's ours.
Mayor, I have 2 questions. 2 questions. Is this modeling going to take into account induced demand? Meaning, normally you do the modeling, you try to see what the demand for additional infrastructure is. Sometimes we go overboard, build more than what was demanded, and then it results in more congestion, more problems than the immediate need. So my question is simply, is this modeling going to take into account induced demand?
Understanding induced demand as demand that usually is added when a project is built. Is that your definition? You build a project and for a period of time you have an additional number of trips that are diverted to that project.
No, what I'm talking about is, this is a modeling to determine future
Yes.
needs, right?
Yes.
And so you would say, well, for this particular location, we need X number of lanes in order to meet that future need,
Yes.
right? But sometimes, under this concept of induced demand, we induce more than is necessary, that they just leads into this cycle of creating more traffic and pollution and the like.
The model is being, will be able to capture demand, period. And I need to be really careful. Very technically speaking, induced demand is for a period of time, you might have rerouting of travel because of additional, or the additional capacity. That specific, those specific phenomena are not part of this model. It does include the estimation of the future demand once normalized.
Okay. Well, I'm referring to some building that's taking place in Houston where it has created more congestion than was necessary. Secondly, since it takes into account socioeconomic factors, is the modeling going to include public transportation alternatives?
Definitely. It already, yes, different modes for transit, yes.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Well, my understanding is part of the model is for the purpose of really gathering data.
Yes.
So when the senator is asking about increased demand, is by gathering data,
Yes.
it will actually help produce and show whether or not there is an increased demand,
Yes.
among other things that it's doing.
Right, correct.
And it's in compliance with the federal and state laws that are necessary in order to operate in the future
Right. And that-
within
that's what-
standards.
Yes, sir.
Okay.
And that's,
Thank you.
yeah.
Just, Eduardo, the TDM is approved by the FHWA?
Yes.
Okay, so Cambridge will make sure that that TDM is approved, part of their scope is to make sure that they give us a product that's already approved by
Absolutely.
FSLB, right? Okay.
Yeah, that,
Absolutely.
I think that's where you were trying to.
Right.
that's where I was going.
Right. So in the development of the travel demand model, it's not only federal highway but with TxDOT and New Mexico DOT, but TxDOT, the Transportation Planning and Programming Division, typically develops the travel demand models for most MPOs. It's only a few number of MPOs that develop their own models. So even if we're doing this on our own with a consultant helping us, we are in super close coordination with EPMP and with Federal Highway, because if our model doesn't work, then our conformity and our projects and anything that has to do with traffic numbers, which is almost every project, are not going to be approved. So yeah, there is very close coordination in the development of the model, and later on as we use it for project analysis and all that. So yeah, I mean, we're not doing this by ourselves in a vacuum.
And just one more question, Eduardo, where's the money coming from for the $800,000?
This is mostly from planning funds from the MPO. This is,
Part of the regular allocation, the normal allocation?
yes.
Is that reflected in the
In the UPWP, yes.
Okay.
Is there any further discussion? We have a motion.
To approve.
Second.
Have a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carried. I was remiss on this, an agenda item, we did not do open comment period, so if we, with indulgence of the board, we can move back to open comment period. Has anybody signed up for open comment?
No, it's actually for item 3, is the open comment that starts.
I am good, okay. So now we'll have open comment period.
Should
Has
I?
anybody signed up?
Yes, for item 3, yes.
But for item 3, but for the open comment period of, nobody was signed up for that, so okay, I'm not remiss there. Very good. We'll go to item 3.
Item 3 is to adopt the state of Texas and the state of New Mexico performance measure, PM1 2020 safety targets.
Morning, Ray McNichol, Chair of the TPAC Committee. If you remind y'all on last year about the same time, we brought a similar item to you. Once a year, we need to update the state of Texas and the state of New Mexico's performance measures on the safety targets. This is a rolling 5-year program that is reducing the percentages annually. It's inside your packet. I know you've got an open comment. Sounds like someone wants to speak if you want. And
There is a commenter on this item?
Yes.
Can we look at you from that now?
Scott White?
Mr. White?
Good morning, members of the MPO. Just as Mr. McNichol said, he was here last year, I was here last year to address this issue. And it's one I think we really need to be focused very carefully on, because when we approve these numbers, we are essentially saying, whether it's your intent or not, but you're saying that these are the acceptable deaths. These are the acceptable collisions over this time. This is an opportunity for you as policy board to say these are not acceptable, and that our goal should not just be an incremental reduction in these traffic fatalities and these traffic crashes, but this is an opportunity to say we want to set a target of 0 traffic fatalities. Internationally, there is a movement called Vision Zero, whose goal is to implement policies, design standards across the board to reduce traffic fatalities and traffic crashes as much as possible. We know 0 is probably not realistic, but Oslo last year only had 1 traffic fatality because they've been implementing Vision Zero. It's possible to get very close, and it's something we should aspire to. We have too many traffic fatalities as it is, And over the past 2 years, almost half of our traffic fatalities just in El Paso were pedestrians. When you think about that, and you think about what we are doing and the kind of projects we're outlining here, are we really wanting to make traffic fatalities something of the past? It's something we aspire to. It's be something you as a policy board should aspire to. Doesn't mean you have to do it today, but you can take this time to set that goal and say, let's put that target out there, and maybe by 2040, we have everything in place that everything we do is about making sure safety truly is the priority, and that there are no accidental deaths out there, as we call them. And that's a problem too, just the language we use. We call them accidents. A lot of these are preventable. And we should be doing something to prevent them. And we can start here. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. White.
I did want to point out that the averages are, the expectations are increasing on the level of safetiness. That's one of the things you'll find in the packet. It shows up in some of the background information you receive. Every year the percentage decrease is increasing, or by increase, we want to see less. Okay. Any questions? And I know I've got NPO staff to help me. Yes, sir.
I agree with Mr. White's observations about what we ought to be doing to reduce deaths here in our roadways. I think what you have is in your measurement here about a 2% reduction is the goal in pedestrian deaths, and yet anytime you pick up the newspaper, almost every week you see some pedestrian killed in our roadways. Down in the lower valley especially, but everywhere. I don't know if this number is correct, but I thought I saw something about just in October alone that there were about 25 deaths here, pedestrian deaths. I don't know if that's true. Okay, so, but this notion of setting a goal of Vision Zero, I think is important. That's something that I tried to promote in the Senate Transportation Committee this last session. Unfortunately, couldn't get support for it. So the state of Texas is not one of those that has Vision Zero as a goal compared to other states. But I think that should be our goal. The Vision Zero goal.
Just to let you know, the Texas Commission has adopted a Vision Zero by 2050. So we are one of the states that is on board for zero fatalities.
Well, and you're saying that was done through transportation, to the Texas Department of Transportation?
Yes,
That's what I mean, the commission.
the commission,
Yeah.
which includes Texas.
But why are we not including that here in our?
No, we have a system safety program. As a matter of fact, this year the El Paso District was awarded $18 million additional dollars to improve safety. Among those was completion of cable barrier along I-10 for about $8 million to the remainder of the district. We have a couple of jobs for pedestrian safety. One on Mesa, we got a rail job just north of UTEP, where we have some obsolete rail that we're going to go to safety shape rail. So we have 5 major safety jobs that we were awarded just this year, and should be met by the end of our fiscal year to promote safety.
Yeah.
So if you look at we continuously look at improving safety. We're going to go back and ask for more dollars as a district. Half of our fatalities occur on I-10. A large or significant number of them being pedestrian-based. So you'll be seeing some initiatives to deter pedestrian crossings along I-10, including anything we can do. Might include pedestrian fencing to redirect pedestrians to use interchanges to cross I-10 rather than trying to cross mid-block. So we're looking at everything we can do to prevent fatalities on our roadways.
Well, that's good. I mean, I think that's what we need to do to allocate more funding for pedestrian safety. My point is still, why is our measurement just a 2% reduction as opposed to a higher measurement?
We're looking at
in order to
eliminating.
address the problem
We're
we
looking
have.
at eliminating them altogether. And that's, taking a holistic approach by doing public outreach from our safety staff, meaning, programs for DWI, for buckling up your children, for buckling up yourself when you get into vehicles, not just hard measures, but public outreach measures as well, so.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Senator, also, I think, first of all, you asked a very important question. So I'd like to add to what Tomas was talking about, our textile engineer. We worked with them, and they also added 2 lights on Mesa where the young lady got killed not too long ago. So they stepped up and they did that, and that's Mesa is one of the state highways, so we wanted to thank them publicly for doing that because that was something that had been requested for quite some time, and Tomas and with his leadership and his staff, they put that up, I guess, a few months ago. So that's been up in place. So thank you for doing that. The other thing is we put some programs in place that are educational in nature. Like he's talking about, we've partnered with them. We have some videos that we put together. We've sent out to the school districts. We've sent out to, and we'll resend it again to them, to El Paso Community College, also to UTEP. And also the message has been to the superintendents, send it out to all the kids that are now starting to drive, and then have them share it with their families, because one of their best practices is they'll robocall you to death, or they'll text message you to death, or they'll email you, and I said, that's one of your strengths, if you wouldn't mind pushing that out. I'll send it to them again, to have them push it out again in terms of, how safety is very, very important. We also did a project with one of the schools, and the kids themselves put a video together, and we showed it to council. I'm happy to bring it to one of these meetings to show it to everyone, and/or send it via email so it can be distributed to everyone that's here. But in addition to that, because our council challenged us and said, well, we don't just want educational programs and videos, what are we doing physically? I would tell you, a while back I used to think that way too, about you mean education videos, but that has to be part of it too. Because some people will drink and they'll drive, or some people will just be careless, or they'll check their messages. You just can't get off of these things. And there's just a lot of things like that happen that are careless, and whether it's the fault of the pedestrian or the fault of the driver. Sometimes it's either side, depending on how it happened. I think some people cross Mesa like if they own it, and I know that we're all, by law, are supposed to yield to pedestrians. And people need to be educated. Hey, don't be crossing Mesa like you own it, because you're going to get run over. And it's not a funny thing, but I say it like that because people need to hear that over and over. But we've also signed additional police officers on our DWI task force. We've partnered with the DPS, and what happens with that? There's more. Unfortunately, there's more people that get tickets, or there's more arrests. And so we also have. I don't know if you've seen it, but we have. Like the motorcycle units that are on Mesa, and I keep talking about Mesa because the numbers are what they are, and so we don't just put them there. We put them on 375. There's just been a lot more presence where we have our traffic unit that we stood back up again, because over the last couple of decades, where the police numbers had gone down, that was one of the things that suffered. The traffic division was reduced, and so we've been able to increase that because of council's commitment to adding more police officers, and then that's been one of the areas, the priority areas, because I'm like you, I told staff in several staff meetings, why do we have somebody dying every week? Because it feels that way. If it's not happening, it feels like we issue out a press release, somebody just got killed again. And so I just wanted to share that with you because I think you raised a very important issue. And one of which is very important to us as well, and I wanted to share what TxDOT has done and how Tomas, with his leadership, how he stepped up when he started working here. He's already made a huge difference. So I just wanted to share that.
Thank you, I appreciate that.
Yes, sir.
Chair, everybody makes a valid point, okay? We understand that we are here to better our communities, okay? There's no doubt about it. But I mean, the numbers don't lie. Numbers don't lie. We can't tell a person where not to cross. And we've seen it all. We have seen people cross in the middle where they're not supposed to. So it doesn't matter what policies we put in place, because it's all nice and it's all hunky-dory, like you want to call it, you know. It doesn't matter what policies we put. Yes, we're going to strive for zero, but you know what? We have to be realistic, because there's some people that just don't care about crosswalks. There's people that I've seen run through I-10, you know. Motorists who are drinking and driving, you know, those are issues that we have no control. It doesn't matter what kind of policies we put in place. If we can't control every single one of the pedestrians or the drivers, then we're going to have accidents. Yes, I want the public to understand that, yes, we do want to be safe and put safeguards so that everybody can be safe in our streets. But realistically, you know, 2% it's great. It's great, but we can't go to zero just from implementing policies. We're striving to there. We want to make better. You heard Tomas's implementations, the cities as well. I mean, those are great. Those are things that I'm going to take back to my city as well. You know, but realistically, you know, we want to be at zero. And we want the public to know that, you know, we are having the best interest of our citizens. You know, we're going to strive for it, but truth be told, it's very difficult when people just cross and run through the middle of the street or the middle of the highway, or when they drink. It's very difficult. And we just want everybody to know that we are doing the best we can.
Well, I happen to think that more investment, more allocation of our transportation dollars for pedestrian safety, along with what was just said about education, could go a long way towards reducing that. I hope we're not wanting to send a message that regardless of what policies we come up with, that people are still going to do these foolish things, right? That's human nature, but more investment and more education, I think, can go a long way towards reducing pedestrian deaths.
From what I understand from the conversation, to address the 2%, this plan actually is a zero vision plan in a realistic manner. The zero vision plan does exist. This is a zero vision plan by 2050.
By 2050. That's my problem.
It is a, some people would say a very aggressive very aggressive plan for safety.
30 more years.
Pragmatically, non-approval of this plan would jeopardize us.
Yeah, and I will let Roger explain as always, there's the bureaucratic, the procedural stuff and all that. I mean, I just have to say, I don't disagree with the senator at all. You know, it seems like a zero accident by 2050, that's 30 years from now.
Yeah.
And I don't disagree with you in terms of that, but procedurally, I think the NPOs in Texas have been, all of them, right, Roger, have adopted at the state level. So
both New Mexico and Texas are headed in that direction. So what is important here is that performance-based planning requires us to have safety targets, and we have to adopt them yearly. So what we're talking about locally is what we need to be, the conversations we need to be having, and we need to set targets. What all the MPOs are doing at this point are, in Texas and New Mexico, are adopting what the states are doing to head in the direction of getting to that point where we do have no fatalities and no serious injuries and so on. It's going to take time to get there. So what is our actual local target is what we need to be discussing and trying to get to that point and how we're going to get there. From a procedural standpoint, yes, we need to adopt safety targets because we're required to do that, and it happens on a yearly basis. So we're at that point again where and what all the other MPOs are doing is saying the efforts by the states are to get us to that point, and they are adopting the state's targets, and that's what this is about.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you for the presentation. I know we all care about this issue, so I know it's procedural, so for I think offline, a lot of us can have conversations about how we move the ball forward, but for the procedural aspect, I move that we accept the plan.
Second.
Okay, I have a motion, is there a second?
Second.
I have a motion and a second. There is further discussion.
No, I'm good.
I'm sorry.
Thank you.
Oh, I'm sorry, Tony.
No, you're fine.
Okay.
You're fine.
Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carried.
Item number 4 is the inclusion of the Sunland Park Port of Entry in the new 2050 MTQ.
I believe this might be Mayor Pereira.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Actually, at this time, I do want to say thanks to the staff and everyone and feedback for looking at this particular item. I know there's some further coordination that has to happen with NMDOT, and we'll be working on that. Also, I will be waiting for the call for project for the 2050 MTP for the inclusion of this project. So actually, at this time, I would move to delete this item from the agenda.
Second.
I have a motion to delete from the sponsor in a second. Is there any further discussion?
Mr. Chair.
Yes.
The only thing is I would ask the record reflect my comments made as well.
With that caveat to this motion, is there any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carried. Item number 5.
Item number 5, to amend the Destino 2045 Metropolitan Transportation Plan and the Destino 2019-2023 Transportation Improvement Program. 2, A, New Central Business District, CBD 4, from fiscal year 2020 to fiscal year 2021. B, reduce costs in Category 7 Surface Transportation Program, Metro Mobility, on SLP 75 interchange in fiscal year 2020. C, program preliminary engineering funds on Valley Chili Road, PE phase, with limits from SH20 Donovan to I-10 in fiscal year 2020. D, program North Carrington reconstruction with limits from East Lake Boulevard to Ox Road Drive in fiscal year 2022. E, program Rojas Drive whitening and reconstruction with limits from Loop 375 to Bill Burnett in fiscal year 2021. F, program PE funds on Nuevo Hueco Tanks Road, PE phase, with limits from FM 76 North Loop Drive to SH 20 Alameda Avenue in fiscal year 2020. G, program FM 1905, reconstruction with limits from SH 20 Main Street to I-10 in fiscal year 2021. H, move I-10 widening limits from Sunday Park Drive to Mesa Drive from fiscal year 2022 to fiscal year 2030.
Good morning, again, Brent Nickel, Chair of the TPAC. This item is kind of in, goes with the action that the MPO took last month, trying to kind of establish a new local plan and trying to move some projects forwards and others back based on a priority that we established at the meeting. And so this action is addressing the paperwork in the background, if you will, to make that plan go in place. I know Eduardo will talk to this in more detail.
Right, if I may, Mr. Chair. So, yeah, Mr. McNichol is correct. All of these tip changes or the request to make these changes are driven by the mobility plan that was approved last month. So again, as we mentioned before, the plan that was approved last month is more of a strategic document that gives us sort of like a guideline. But now the details for each individual project, we're beginning to see this. You know, we're programming, for example, engineering for 2 of the projects so that we can start the engineering for them. But again, as we continue moving forward, we're going to be continuing to bring changes to you all. But this is all within the umbrella of the mobility plan that was approved by this body last month.
Is there discussion? Do I have a motion?
Motion. Second.
Public comment. There's public comments.
Oh, there's public comment, I'm sorry.
Scott White.
Mr. White.
Good morning again, Scott White with El Paso Bicycle Pedestrian Coalition. And In conjunction with the note that what we're doing here today is considering some tactical changes, I would encourage you to also think about what was passed last month, meaning that mobility plan. Not just the projects and how they were aligned, but the values that were supposedly put forward to this body in terms of multimodal transportation, in terms of active transportation, in terms of safety. When we talk about these projects, and as we just talked about with the targeting of safety, we need not just the policies, we need the infrastructure where these design standards are built in that provide safety, that make it safer for pedestrians, that make it safer for people in cars, regardless of how you get around. And as I look at some of these projects, I'm curious why, when we extol the virtues of multimodal transportation and transit, we're looking at projects that in many cases are about capacity versus making it safer for people to get around. So when we talk about engineering, we talk about planning, we talk about policy, one of these things is also how we talk about how people get around. Some of the assumptions underlying these very design principles, these projects, are assuming people are going to get around in cars, not that people are going to be walking through these intersections. People are going to be riding bikes to and from work. These are all things that have to be considered if we want to make our roads safe for every single person. If we are going to talk about the big issues of things like equity and how we are best using our transportation funds, we should be talking about not how people get around in vehicles or how many vehicles are out there, but how people get around and how many people get around and how to best move them around safely. Whether that is transit, whether it is redesigning intersections so they are safe and accommodating for people so that they are frequent enough so that people can cross so they don't have to cross mid-block. These are all things that when we look at these plans and we look forward, these are principles that should be built into the very policy and the very engineering and design standards. That we are designing for people, not simply just for cars. That's when we can truly talk about a mobility plan that is safe, accessible, and equitable for everyone. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Clark. I'm sorry, did we have a motion on this?
I make a
motion.
And I second it.
Is there further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carried.
Item number 6. Amend the Destino 2045 MTP, congestion mitigation and air quality projects, fiscal year 2023 to 2027, to A, increase cost in category 5 CMAQ from the $3,669,976 to $5,669,976 on traffic management center, upgrade phase 2 in fiscal year 2023. B, move park and ride car west from fiscal year 2023 to fiscal year 2024. C, move Montana RTS third year operating assistance from fiscal year 2029 to 2023. D, move Water Highway West hike and bike trail from fiscal year 2026 to fiscal year 2024 and reduce the cost and category 5 CMAQ from $2,170,423 to $1,869,824. E, program for East Corridor Phase 1 using $5,447,592 of category 5 CMAQ in fiscal year 2025. F, program for East Corridor Phase 2 using $2,460,000 of category 5 CMAQ in fiscal year 2026. And then G, reduce cost and category 5 CMAQ from $3,794,578 to $1,160,000 on Playa Train hike and bike trail. reduce cost and category 5 CMAQ from $5 million to $607,806 to $4,924,554 on Playa Drain Height and Bike Trail. Amend the Destino 2019. It's amend the Destino 2019-2023 TIP to reduce cost in category 5 CMAQ from $5,360,329 to $3,660,329 on TMC upgrade phase 1 in fiscal year 2020.
Good morning, again, Greg Nickel, Chair of the TPAC. I want to point out a couple things to you here, that on the front page of the agenda, there's a number that's different that's in the backup material. It goes with item number F. On the front page, I think it reads $2,260,000. On this page, it reads $2,460,000. On this page, the $2,460,000 is the correct number. The first page is just a typo. So I want to bring that to your attention so that you're aware of that. Okay. And again, this item again is addressing some of the changes that we need to make to the Destino 2045 plan related to a utility pipe that we heard discussion during our training about this morning that has causing us to have to get it redone, and it's also allowing us now to clean up some things, adjust some things to meet where we are today. It also has some ties back to physically constraining the TIP, sorry, couldn't get it out.
I noticed there's a lot of movement in CMAQ funds. Was there any additional CMAQ funds that came in, or?
This is a good question. The CMAQ, again, is tied back to, if you remember, San Antonio is now one of the new entities in the state of Texas that some of the CMAQ funds are getting redistributed, and this is also going into that to bring us into physical constraint.
If I may, Mr. Chair, yeah, that's exactly correct. And there's some backup in the last piece of the backup for this item, and it shows the actual balances after we make all of these movements. In some cases, we're at zero, but we're constrained, and in some cases, we have just a little bit of money. But because of San Antonio coming into the non-attainment arena, that all of the MPOs are having to reduce their CMAQ, and that was the main thing that's going on here, is to achieve fiscal constraint because of that.
So yes, we've talked about this before, about San Antonio coming in and taking some part of the pie, right?
Right.
Does this mean, do we have the funding for these projects at these reduced levels?
Our coordination with the entities is ongoing, and at this point, they're all in agreement that this is the numbers that they can work with. Now, some of these projects are way out, and they're in the MTP, and things are subject to change over time. But at this point, yes, they are, and we are, from our perspective, as far as the MPO goes, we have to demonstrate fiscal constraint throughout the whole life of the 10 years at least of the MTP.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
I'm going to approve the revision on item F.
Second.
I have a motion and a second. Further discussion? Hearing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Read item 7, please.
Item 7,
Did we approve it? We just made it.
Yeah, we
We just made the amendment, right?
What's that?
Did we approve the item, or did we just approve
We
your
approved
your
it.
amendment?
We approved the revision on item F.
Okay, the revision that, thank you.
Item 7, to amend the federal functional classification, Texas, El Paso County, Texas. A, John Hayes Extension, Pelican Drive to Mountwood Drive from classification to proposed major collector. B, Tierra Este Extension, Pelican Drive to Cozy Cove Avenue from unclassified to proposed major collector. C, Sean Haggerty Drive Extension, Macomb Street to Dyer from unclassified to proposed minor arterial. D, Borderline Expressway, Loop 375 to New Mexico State Line from unclassified to proposed other freeways and expressways. E, Pandale Drive overpass at I-10 from unclassified to proposed principal arterial. F, Nuevo Hueco Tanks Extension, North Loop FM 76 to Alameda Avenue SH20 from unclassified to proposed minor arterial. G, existing Nuevo Hueco Tanks, I-10 to North Loop Drive from FM 76 from major collector to minor arterial.
Good morning again, Greg Dickel, Chairman of the TPAC. I'm going to ask EPO staff to come up and give you a PowerPoint presentation, the same one they gave us, so that you better understand all the various changes that are taking place, all right?
Good morning, Superintendent of Paso NPO. The NPO staff has completed a review of the federal functional classification as part of the regional mobility plan. We have been in communication with the agencies. We've been gathering the required information, and this table that is shown on the screen lists the segments that require a federal functional classification. All of these were presented at the TPAC meeting except for the last one, which is Mesa Park Street Drive, I'm sorry, and actually that one is item 8, so I'll go over item 7 and 8. So you have a little bit of background information. The recommended federal classification is based on the federal classification concepts, criteria, and procedures developed by FHWA, and this assigns the federal classification of the roadways primarily based on mobility and accessibility. This decision tree helps us determine the classification, and as you can see, it can either be an arteria or a non-arteria based on if there is a lot of driveways or has a lot of accessibility. It could either be a local street or a collector, and also based on the amount of traffic, either major or minor collector. And the arteria classification, it could be minor or principal arteria based on full control or partial control. It can be an expressway, interstate, or a principal arteria since it has high mobility and excellent accessibility. Should we go back to the table? NPO is proposing Duncan's extension. Since it's not existing, it is unclassified. So we're proposing classification of a proposed major collector. For Tierra Este drive extension, it's also non-existing, so it's unclassified, and we're recommending a proposed major collector. Shanghai Drive extension is unclassified and is being proposed as a minor arterial. Borderland Expressway is unclassified, we're proposing it as a freeway and expressway. Pendle Drive is unclassified and we're proposing it into arterial. Nuevo Hueco Tanks extension is unclassified, we're proposing a minor arterial. And based on this new proposed the extension, we're proposing the existing Nuevo Hueco tanks, which is currently a major collector, to be classified as minor arterial. So with this new extension, it will provide more connectivity and an alternate route to I-10, and it is going to show a higher classification based on the mobility. And as we said, we're also proposing Mesa Park Drive to be minor arteria. After the board makes or approves this recommendation, we will be presenting or providing a package to take the TPMP for their review, and they will be submitting the final request to FHWA for approval. So, do you have any questions? we can go to the maps in detail if you need.
Mr. Chair, just to make it easier, this is a requirement for projects to receive funding. In other words, in order for a project to be funded in the TIP, the project has to be functionally classified as an arterial, as a, as a free, whatever it is. So most of the projects that are new location projects, in other words, that do not exist today, that we're building a new facility, those are not modeled, obviously they do not exist, right? So most of the projects here are projects that are, again, identified in the mobility plan that are going to be new location. So again, it's a procedural thing that we need to make sure that these facilities are functionally classified so that later on when we're ready to program the construction money, they will be, in order.
But not all of them are new projects, right? Some are existing, and I guess my question is, given that we're reclassifying them because we're projecting there's going to be higher traffic, more intensity in traffic, are the neighborhoods, the people in the area notified that this is happening because it's going to bring more traffic?
Well, in the case of the existing facilities like Nuevo Hueco tanks between I-10 and FM-76 and North Loop, I mean, the facility is there. Whether we classify it as something or other, it really doesn't affect the physical, operation of the facility itself, right? This is more for procedural, also for modeling purposes, right? Because the model identifies or assigns that link different characteristics if it's an arterial compared to a collector compared to something else in terms of capacity and so on. So what for the existing one, what Sonia is doing is sort of like cleaning up that piece of existing facility.
Yes, I'm sorry, and actually the classification is based on existing conditions, so it's the functional classification of the roadway as it exists, with the exception of all these new roads that aren't built yet. We're proposing this classification, but we'll be reviewing it again after 2020 because it's part of a revision that needs to be done. And if the classifications are, once they're built, are not the ones that are not realistic, we will adjust it.
Thank you.
Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just to be clear, the Pendale Road overpass, is that something similar to the Lee Trevino?
No,
Okay.
we can go to the map. Fine. Can you go back one?
That's that one.
There. On letter E is just a proposed overpass over I-10. Currently, Pendale is classified as principal arteria on both sides of the freeway, and it's just that bridge or overpass that we are recommending for also a principal arteria classification.
So the overpass would be similar to what the proposed overpass would be similar to? Can you give an example of what else?
Where? It's parallel to Lee Trevino, it's just before Zaragoza. It's parallel.
But it will be.
But it's an overpass.
Yeah,
This is a
an overpass.
proposed, so I'm trying to conceptualize what that
Right.
overpass looks like.
Like Lee Trevino.
Okay.
I think I don't remember the details, the exact details, but I'm assuming it's a 4-lane with maybe turn lanes.
Right.
I'm not sure if the concept includes the Texas U-turns.
Okay.
But for our purposes, that overpass does not exist. So you've got Pendale on both sides of I-10. So that project builds the overpass.
Okay.
And the intent is really to provide another connection to help the congestion from the Zaragoza interchange, which is pretty congested.
I was just gonna add to the comment, Senator, that Waco County, there's no residents, they're just already filling up with new homes. So, as far as notifying, there's nobody to notify at this time. The thing is that on the extension, there's not an existing one that we're gonna build as well. to add to the senator is, do we notify the residents that are out down there in Calumet? Will we do these kinds of changes, or it's just?
No, this is more procedural for modeling purposes. Now, as we move forward with the project development activities,
Right.
that absolutely.
Then we have to.
Exactly.
Okay.
Exactly right.
I move to accept these proposals.
Second.
We do have a motion and a second, however, we will take public comment prior to.
And just one comment, if we can take on item 7 and 8, because they're good together.
Okay, so the action, okay. Let's go ahead and get public comment, and then we will redo the vote.
Good morning again, for the record, Scott White, El Paso Bicycle District Coalition. As we look at these housekeeping procedures, this is where we're really setting the policy and the vision for what we want our transportation to look like in the future. When we talk about whether this is an arterial or a collector or whatnot, we're talking about certain volumes of vehicular traffic. We're not talking about moving people. We're talking about moving vehicles. And that's where I think sometimes we're missing the vision that we could have really talked about more last month, and I wish I would have been here, could have been here last month when we talked about the mobility plan. But as we talk about these things, and as we look forward, as we make these decisions, these are the kind of things that determine how we design these roadways. We're talking about the higher we have them on the hierarchy, we're talking about moving more and more vehicles. It's getting away from moving people and moving people safely. If we want to address issues of congestion, of air quality, if, as you heard this morning, we talked about the NEPA issue and the things that we have to consider, some of these things that we have to consider and we have to factor in are the people who live in these communities, not just for notifying them, but how these things change their lives. You've got people in and around Pendale. Yes, that's an industrial area, but it's also been identified as a bike corridor. You make this bridge and you make it like Lee Trevino, no one's going to want to use that as that kind of corridor for active transportation. Where in the future of these plans are we planning for people versus just planning for vehicles? I know you have to make this decision today, but as we go forward, as we talk about these things, these are the kind of policy decisions I really hoped, and I've challenged you all in the past, to be looking at how we plan to move people, not just moving vehicles. These are the kind of things that really impact the quality of life. They impact the economic value that these projects may or may not have. It impacts the air quality. It impacts so many things above and beyond just what we're saying in terms of housekeeping. This is the kind of vision I hope you all keep in mind for the future when we make these plans, how they truly impact everyone above and beyond just moving vehicles. Let's talk about moving people and moving them safely.
Thank you, Mr. White. Thank you. Now, if I might return, we have been asked to include item number 8 in the motion. So would you amend your motion to do that?
Yes.
Oh, yes.
Okay.
I move to amend my amendment.
So, I'll second.
Is there further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Item number 9 is approval of the Executive Director Performance Plan.
Mr. Chair, members of the board. So the form that is in your package is a form that we approved through the executive committee let me take a couple steps back. Per my contract, there are two steps that need to happen. The first is that within the first 120 days of me beginning my job as executive director, I needed to set up a performance plan and an evaluation form and so on. So what we agreed to do through the executive committee was, we agreed that there's not a need to develop a lengthy performance plan and all that. So we simplified it, and the form that would be used for the actual evaluation is what needs approval from the policy board. And again, Sergio, did I explain it correctly? Make sure that.
Yes, sir, you did. And I just want to be clear that, today we're not discussing Mr. Eduardo's evaluation at all. All we're doing is, per his contract, he needs to be evaluated before the end of the 12-month period. And per his contract, he needed to create a self-evaluation form. This is the form that was created in conjunction with the executive committee, and it's before you for review and approval or any comments you may have before we come back to you before the actual evaluation.
So this is a form, this is sort of like the vehicle. Now the second step is actually beginning the evaluation process, which starts with a self-evaluation that I will submit to the executive committee. The executive committee will do the work, and the executive committee will certainly do as they feel is best. And then ultimately that evaluation has to come back to the policy board for final concurrence,
Yes,
approval, whatever the action is. So we're asking you just to approve the form itself today.
So with that explanation,
Oh,
Question.
one,
Thank you, Mr. Chair. In terms of the evaluation, will members who have lost their voting privileges be able to participate in this evaluation?
Well, the evaluation per the contract is going to be handled by the executive committee. So we're talking about the executive committee, performing the actual work. I would assume that based on the bylaws, if they don't have a vote, they
can't participate.
They can't participate, right?
Although I'll look into that before we actually do this evaluation.
I think that's important.
Yeah.
If a member is not in good standing in terms of providing votes and attending and participating, I think they should not be able to provide the input on the evaluation.
I'd be in trouble if they don't have a vote and they like me.
Proxy will come out.
okay, to be clear, this is only on the approval of the form.
Yeah.
Okay.
Motion approved.
Second. Motion and a second. Further discussion? Hearing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carried. Now that concludes the action items. We can then move on to the reports.
I have one question. Do you agree with the form?
Yeah, definitely. And just as background, we did look. I mean, it was my responsibility to start all this, and we did research. We looked at the other evaluation processes for through EPMPO Texas, and I feel very comfortable with this.
Okay. On to reports.
All right, so there's a couple of things I wanted to talk to you about. There we go. All right, so as we all know, in December, at the December meeting, this board approved the mobility plan, which really starts the real fun, which is individually looking at projects, how we're going to be implementing them, and so on. Especially for the local government projects, that's really the exciting part because, again, we were able to accelerate about $176 million of projects, but each individual project has its own set of complexities and issues and so on. So we started the process, immediately after the TPB meeting, the policy board meeting of last month, and individually started meeting with the sponsors for each project. So there you see the list of meetings that we had over the holiday break with the City of Socorro and staff. Again, for Hueco tanks, the Nuevo Hueco tanks, that's a project where Very likely the RMA will come in. Great project, given that the city of Socorro has a TRZ that's going to help with the funding on that and showing local skin of the game. But we need a mechanism to make the money, available today for construction and then pay back. And the RMA has always been very helpful in doing that. The same with the village of Vinton. We had a meeting on January the 3rd. Again, the RMA was there. The county of El Paso, again, very excited about the partnership between the village and the county, providing the local match for that. Possibly the RMA coming in as well to help with the implementation, the development and implementation of the project. With City of El Paso staff, I'm noting there the December 20th, but we've had many other meetings coordinating the different projects of Rojas, Sean Haggerty, and so on. We presented also to the Mobility Coalition. Again, as we know, that's a very important partner for our region. Very helpful, especially when we go out and talk about funding to the different to the legislature, to the Texas Transportation Commission, the Texas administration, and so on. Town of Horizon City on January the 10th. Again, looking at ways of how are we going to implement the North Darrington reconstruction project that is one of the top priorities for Horizon City. And then this week, actually on Wednesday, we met with the Transportation Planning and Programming Division of TxDOT, which is again very important because they are the ones that we need their help. We need also for them to understand what this plan, what the plan is, but also what we need from them in terms of helping us move the funding around and then clearly also making the requests for the projects that are not funded to help us. Well, that meeting itself was more for us to communicate to them that we have a plan. The very important step that was taken by this board in December, use that now as evidence that we have our priorities established, that there is consensus, and now they need to help us. So we're putting a little bit of the pressure on them as well. So that was a great meeting. Two important meetings that are pending with Federal Highway. Same thing, we want to communicate to them, explain what the mobility plan is, the intent of moving projects around, but implementing or accelerating the local government projects, and make sure that they understand, going back to the procedural stuff. As we move forward with these projects, they will need they will all have different environmental requirements, air quality, project level, conformity, determinations, and so on. And try to make sure that they understand what it means, but they also, for them to know what the tentative schedule is for individual projects. Right there, as you remember, some of the projects are going to be implemented in the next 5 years. So we want to make sure that they know that these projects are coming their way. And as well, the amendments that we're going to be talking about later. Federal Highway, as you know, is the lead agency for the conformity determination. So all of these things need to fall into place and make them. And so it's important for us to communicate to them so that they understand that there's a lot of stuff coming in from El Paso, and they need to make room for us in their very, very busy schedules. So if you have any thoughts or comments on questions on that.
Anyway.
All right. Can we do some other item? All right, so one of the other things that we talked about was to give the mobility plan its own identity, its own brand, and this is what we came up with. Instead of calling it Mobility Plan Version 2019, I think we talked about it internally a lot, and we thought that calling this RMS 2020 would be a very appropriate name. RMS standing for Regional Mobility Strategy 2020. It fits within the regional mobility strategy that the region has been engaged in. If you recall, part of the initial part of the presentation in December talked about this RMS effort. That again came in as a response to the perception of lack of leadership for the region, lack of consensus that was hurting us, especially in going out and asking for funding for our projects. So the mobility plan hopefully the new name RMS 2020 will catch. So from now on, let's call it RMS 2020, and so that people understand what we're talking about.
So Eduardo's following it out, right?
Yeah. It's a different name. We thought about but of course, when you talk about names, when you talk about logos, when you talk about taglines and all that, there was so many different ideas and possibilities and options and all that, but we got the folks from HNTV to help us. They're creative people, and I'm amazed at what they do. I mean, of course they're professionals in what they do, but they came in. Initially we told them, well, what is this plan? What do we want to communicate? Well, we want to communicate priorities, that we're focused, that there's consensus, and that we're moving forward with all of this. So they came up with multiple combinations, and we vetted them in the small focus group. So we came up with this. So this is a complete style guide. Gabby, can you go down? So it's not just the logo and the tagline, but we have a mission statement that, of course, we can tweak it. But again, what we're communicating with this is that we are one region, many voices that coming together with one voice and one strategy. And then for practical purposes, the logo can be used, that's a color version, then you see the black and white that could be used for different documents. Go down. No, go down. I mean, that's just the technicalities now. For the map, we can use the concept of the tiles. The tiles build the logo, and you see the star there. But cleverly, they came up with the idea that we can use also the tiles for identifying projects or other things on the maps. Next. For graphic treatment of charts and tables and graphs. Next. And even for PowerPoint presentations. Again, that would be the cover slide and then ideas for what the slides could look like. But again, the important thing is that we have now a brand, we have a consistent color scheme, that we're not using different styles. And again, it's to make the point, hammer the point, this is the RMS 2020, it's our strategic plan for El Paso. I think that's, again, also examples, letterheads for letters, reports, memos, whatever that we use to communicate with the outside world. So that's pretty much it, as far as the branding and the report. If you have any other comments or questions, happy to entertain them.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Item 11.
Mr. Chairman. Hey, Eduardo, I'd just like to tell you that you and the staff and the team y'all put together did a great job. It's a very good strategy, very good message, one of which is much needed.
Well, thank you. I mean, there was a lot of people that were involved in here, but again, I have to stress the creative people. I guess if I was stranded in an island, I could come up with that in 20 years, maybe. But the way that they come up with these concepts and put it into a logo, a brand, a complete brand. But there was a lot of people that helped with this, so thank you for the contribution.
Tommy, how do we dovetail this? We've got our own one region focus with Bob Wingo, and we talked a lot about not trying to take off in different tangents. And do you see any connection to what we're trying to accomplish, so that we'll either support each other or at least become one?
It's funny you bring that up, because I was thinking the same thing. So I think the video and the message that that sends, and that it does capture the entire region. It does bring in New Mexico, Juarez, the county, the city, just the entire region, speaking as one voice, just complements this and vice versa. So I very much think we probably could share that with Eduardo and then see how he can, like you said, play off of it. I think it's a very good point, Judge.
Yeah.
Thank you for bringing it up.
Absolutely.
We have public comments for item 10.
I'm sorry?
Public comments for item 10.
Oh, we have public comment?
Mr. White?
Okay, let's go on to item 11.
Item 11, amendment to the December 2045 MTE and development of the new 2021-2024 TIP and transportation conformity reports.
This item is to come back to the need for an amendment for a long-range transportation plan and the conformity. The TIP is the TIP that will line up with it. It's actually a new TIP for the state that is required. But this amendment started back when there was a TxDOT project that is on Loop 375 from Montana to the spur. 601 has some utility issues, and there was a need to push that project across network years, which requires conformity. And then all of the need for the mobility plan is incorporated into this as far as the projects that also move across network years. To move those projects, unlike the items previous to this, which we can go ahead and submit those for approval through the process with the state and the federal agencies, these require us to go back and do air quality and conformity. So there's a schedule here, and you can see that we're here at the end of January now with we're moving forward very soon with a call with the consultation partners. And this call is going to be talk about projects I'll have here in a moment to present to you. And then we need to work with them to get consensus on our approach to move forward with this amendment. And when we get to that point, we take our modeling, which is going on now, and the projects, and we incorporate those into the conformity document, and we get the air quality modeling done through our Texas Transportation Institute that does the air quality portion for us. So when we get this consultation call going here in a couple of weeks, we'll be having all of those discussions. And then if you can move forward, Gabby, on the, no, actually on the timeline. You'll see we're in February, we're still in the development of our documents. We'll come back with a report at the next meeting to give you a status. And then in March, we actually need to get the recommendation and approval on the draft version to start public involvement. We have to do the public involvement. We'll take that out for public comments, bring those comments back to you, and then in May, we will be back here for action from the policy board on the documents to include the conformity for the air quality. And then we submit them to the federal agencies and our consultation partners so that we start that process to work through all of the amendments and get ultimately an approval before the end of the fiscal year. That lines up closely with where the TxDOT project's at. It lines up with where the new TIP needs to be approved that starts in the new fiscal year. And we'll then transfer from operating out of the current conformity into a new conformity with all of these amendments included. Go to the next slide, please. These are the projects that need to be part of that. So the projects up to this point that we've been talking about that we can move forward with do not require this rigorous process. These do, though, and we can talk about projects if we want to go into any detail, but generally what we're doing is if you remember in the mobility plan, there was a lot of TxDOT projects that were being pushed back, freed up $176 million of funds for local entities to put onto local projects. Well, to move those projects, in the case here from the 20 to the 30-40 network requires the air quality modeling. There's projects, the one project that's being moved from the 20 to the 30 is the Loop 375 project that we talked about that meets the utilities. And then on down, you'll see there's projects that are being accelerated from the 40 to the 30. Ultimately, we're talking about two projects there, the Nuevo Hueco Tanks project that is being phased for the purposes of North Loop to Alameda, and here the Este project that also needs to come in. These all line up with the mobility plan. These are things that you have already approved as part of the mobility plan. It now needs to move forward into the MPO documents, the formal documents that allow us to actually do these things. And then there's a phase there of the Nuevo Hueco tanks that will stay in the current 2040 network. But we've also got some things going on with road diets that we've talked about here before. And we've been working with consultation partners to get this resolved and have not yet had an answer from them. Although we've been talking to them and there may be some things coming soon. But this is just to cover us in case these three projects, CBD4, Downtown Bicycle Improvements Phase 1, and STEP two-way cycle track, you would think these don't have any implications to conformity. But because of the road diets and removing lanes, it potentially could. We don't know that yet, but whether we get action from them prior to this and favorable, saying there's not an issue, or if they are still trying to work with us and give us a decision, this is our opportunity to make sure that we get it in the model the correct way, take care of any things that need to happen for conformity, and address it. Either way, we'll have to capture it in this process. So they're there just to make sure it's sort of a safety net there to capture that. So this is, again, required for us as a non-attainment area for these types of projects to go through this process. And if you have any questions, I'll be happy to answer.
Any comments or questions? Thank you very much, Robert. Let's move on to item 12.
2019 reconciliation for STP, MM, CMAC, and transportation alternatives set aside.
So, per policy, we come back to the policy board every year at this time to give you a status on where we're at with these three MPO administered funding categories. And there's a potential for projects to be programmed if we have funds in the policies. And we've gone through the reconciliation process now. We've actually got numbers for you. There's this table here. You should be looking mainly at the total available balance on the CMAC. The amount that we're seeing that was reconciled from 19 into 2020 after all of the movements that have also been going on with the regional mobility plan, which is important to mention because we have a lot of engineering projects in there. We have the opportunity for small communities to come forward and ask for PE funds at this time of year. So that's really covered. We've done that through the mobility plan. And as far as having available funds, well, there's the 1.8 million there is in CMAC, and because in the mobility plan, we've also incorporated the County of El Paso transit project. So we're trying to reserve $2 million in 21, 22, and 23. This $1.8 million is actually in 20, but this would be the money that would move forward, we expect, into 21. That would be for that first year of the county transit. So that's pretty close to the $2 million. That's what we're able to come up with at this point. We're still working on that, but that's what the expectation is for those funds. The next one is the SDP Category 7. There's only 9,000 and some change there. It's Actually, a little bit of a story behind that. We got dinged somewhat this year by $15 million in the SDP, and we were going to be short considerably because of what has happened over the course of several years. Is we've been getting funds up front, advanced construction funds, and we've utilized those funds. And this has happened not just here in El Paso, but around the state. And there's been great opportunity for us to use those funds, but now we're having to do payback. And all of us in Texas that have had advanced construction projects, all at one time in 2020, had to come up and give back those funds. So it's not really a loss of $15 million, it's just money that we already had, that we had the opportunity to spend previously. And now this year, we were going to be short, but because of some movements with the mobility plan, we were able to, and this is a work in progress, I will mention, there's a lot of things going on. Eduardo talked about coordination with TPMP and FHWA and things that we need to do to make sure to keep our fiscal constraint. But after the reconciliation and the mobility plan, we have the $90,000 left on the table for SDP. As far as the Category 9 TAP funds, we came up a little bit shorter than we thought we expected. We've already had a call for 2020. We thought we were going to, through the reconciliation, have some additional funds come back to us in the neighborhood of about $1.4 million, but we actually only ended up with a little over $1 million. These funds will be available to move forward for future projects that are already programmed in 2021 that do need additional funding. So that's the plan on these three funding categories. We are now, we do have some solid numbers to present to you. As I said, though, the SDP, there's still a lot of work going on behind the scenes to as far as the mobility plan is.
So you don't anticipate a call for projects to
No, sir.
use this up?
No, sir. There's already basically, these funds are already, we have a place for where they need to be basically programmed. There's not any funds for, but the mobility plan is already, with what we would have had a call for projects for, already been able to assist the local communities. Are there any more questions?
Okay, thank you again, Roger. Item 15.
Annual listing of obligated parties.
Morning, Brian Misterman, El Paso MPO. The fiscal year 2019 annual listing of obligated projects is a federally required document that lists transportation projects in the El Paso Metropolitan Planning Organization planning area that had funds obligated in fiscal year 2019. The listing includes projects that were in the fiscal year 2019 of the El Paso MPO TIP and subsequently listed in the STIP. Some of the projects in this listing were grouped, therefore were not listed individually in the TIP, but were led by the state and covered in the STIP. In the summary, the amount of federal funds obligated to the El Paso MPO planning area for fiscal year 2019 is $195,177,038. This just, like I said, it just gives a list of all the projects that had federal funding on them, and it's a requirement that we post this to our website every year. And below you can see the breakdown of the $195 million.
Are there any questions?
Right, just a clarification, the $195 million is the total cost of projects, right?
Correct.
It's not just the federal portion of it.
No, that is just the federal portion.
Oh, it is a federal
Yes.
portion. Okay.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Item 14, New Mexico STP Large Urban and Scenic Mandatory Call for Projects for fiscal year 2021-2023.
Good morning, Gabriela Lopez with the El Paso MPO. So the El Paso MPO has opened the project call today. This is for the New Mexico portion of our planning area, and we are opening a project call for the Surface Transportation Program funds. and the congestion mitigation and air quality mandatory funding. The project call did open today, so all available backup documentations are posted to our website, and we will also be sending an email of the announcement to our distribution list. So the deadline to submit a draft is going to be February 21st, and for the projects that are submitting a CMAQ application, they do need to have a mandatory CMAQ analysis. There's 1,780,418 available funds of CMAQ and 1,245,470 of the Surface Transportation Program. And again, this is only for the New Mexico part of our family. Any questions regarding the project?
Okay.
Item 15, Executive Director Report.
All right, so just wanted to bring to your attention a couple of mostly conferences, meetings that the MPO staff and including myself have attended, and also the upcoming one. So first of all, with the TRB, Transportation Research Board is probably the largest conference and most important conference worldwide for transportation people. It's in Washington, D.C. every year. I hadn't attended this conference for many years, but it's really cool, overwhelming. There's a ton of people, exhibits, the conferences and meetings and workshops that they have. You know, it takes a while to select and choose whatever you want to do and attend. But I just wanted to make a comment on probably the most interesting workshop. It was actually a panel that I attended. It was called Planning at a Crossroads. And it was actually moderated by the head of TRB. I don't know if his title is chairman or executive director, whatever it is, but he's a planner. Got to say that TRB does everything related to transportation, from planning to construction to even pavement design, which I know some people really like that, but certainly not in my field, right? But so Mr. Pedersen really moderated, and so the title of that conference or the workshop was Planning at a Crossroads. So basically saying, you know, we've been doing planning and using a lot of our tools like travel demand modeling, trying to predict the future and all that. But what he's basically saying is that, you know, right now, the way that technology is changing so quickly, it's getting more and more difficult really to forecast the future. He said, well, I was in 1990, I did my 30-year plan. So I felt pretty confident that I could, had a good handle of what the future was going to be. Now, today, I don't know what's going to happen in 5 years. So how does that affect all of us when we do our planning? So it's a very, very provocative, statement. And of course, we all don't have the answers, right? Another really interesting point that was made, and I feel that, personally very, very much, when we talk about looking at the future of transportation, especially when we talk about congestion relief and so on, what we've been doing, how sustainable, is it, right? Like Mr. White was saying, and he's been, communicating this to this board, the reliance that we still have on the private automobile. So yeah, we've got to take care of the immediate issues that we have now for the next 5 to 10 years. But when you really look at the future, what is it how is transportation going to look like in 20, 25 years? And there's always the supply side and the demand side. So there's a lot of focus right now on the supply side and, what are we going to build? Or even on stuff like automated connected vehicles, driverless trucks. I mean, those are like the sexy things, right? It's really cool. There's technology involved. But we don't talk too much about the demand side in terms of, why are we promoting, for people to need more transportation, whether it's sprawl, where we're moving, farther away. So the same person now travels longer distances because, now they live, farther out. So, I mean, a lot of philosophical issues and items that I think we really need to start looking. We still have to take care of our business in the immediate future, We still need to complete our transportation network here locally, but I think it is very important for us, and I wish Scott would hear that, that we do need to think about, oh, there he is, that we really need to think about long-term, what is it that we're doing, and how can we start trying to make those changes? It's not easy. As transportation people, we don't control land use. Land use is the responsibility of the local governments, the cities and municipalities. And the state of Texas counties don't have the ability to zone and to have a little more control on what goes on. So the market is driving a lot of what is happening here. Well, how can we make the market change so that we can make it more attractive for developers and property owners to do what's better in terms of land use patterns, so that again we stop this problem. Anyway, so that was a very, very interesting session. So that's TRB. The next meeting that we attended this week, and Representative Blanco attended that, and it was great that you were there, is BTAC, the Board of Trade Advisory Committee. This is a committee at the state level that is it's mandated by state law, but it's actually run by TxDOT. The chair of BTAC is the Secretary of State, Ruth Hughes. It's her second meeting. So at the meeting, the first part of the meeting, we had a presentation from, on the Mexican side, from the Dr. Carlos Hurtado from the Consejo Coordinador Empresarial, which is on the Mexican side, it's a trade group from the private sector. They do a lot of research, and so his overview was, what's going on the Mexican side now, as far as the federal government, and now that the President López Obrador has been in office officially for about a year. And very interesting, things that he was saying, and says I jump in at any point, but basically the number one thing he started with, USMCA is huge. It's huge for Mexico, it's huge for us here on the border, and we've got to be ready to take advantage of USMCA in terms of the increase in border activity, both certainly on trade, and but also the movement of people. We've got to be ready for that. Interesting that on the Mexican side, he still sees that the macro indicators of the Mexican economy are pretty stable. Indicators in terms of inflation, it's under control. Exchange rate, remember that I asked him specifically about exchange rates. I know that. The fact that the central bank, Banco de Mexico, still remains pretty independent from the rest of the government, or from his control that he has over a lot of the other institutions. But there is a lot of concern on how the federal government is spending their money. A lot of the social programs at the expense of big infrastructure projects that are throughout the country that are very necessary and very important. I thought it was a great presentation, and I don't know if you want to add anything to that.
Sure, thank you, Eduardo. One of the things that, and one of the questions that you brought up, I think is important for the city of El Paso, that I think they're undergoing studies on pedestrian traffic and what they're doing here. Are they going to school? Are they coming to purchase? That helps aid in the the border transportation master plan. So I'm glad you highlighted that, because I think for us, we've got a high number of pedestrians that are crossing every day. We just need to know what they're doing here, and how that impacts transportation and congestion. But I was happy to hear that the city is working on one of those studies.
Right. Yeah, exactly. So the second part was the presentation on the border master plan that TxDOT presented to DTAC, and yeah, I mean there's a lot of talk and a lot of analysis related to trade, so moving trucks back and forth, and obviously very important. But I think that the comment that we've made several times to the TxDOT group that is managing this is that the plan seems to be overly freight centric. And yes, freight is very important, but for us, the movement of people is also tremendously important, especially for our community here in between Juarez and El Paso. So let's wait and see what the team that is developing the border master plan, what else they come up with as they move on to the next phase. But let's not forget that at the end of the day, they're going to be making recommendations on projects. Right now, it's been a lot of analysis and really cool stuff. But at the end of the day, it's about projects, and we have to make sure that our projects compete well with those in Laredo and the Valley. So again, you've heard me say that, repeat it many times, but we have to make sure that we compete well and fair. So that's all I have for those. The upcoming, the Texas Transportation Forum, which is again TxDOT's big conference, annual conference. It's happening February 9th through the 11th. I encourage all of you to attend if you can. I mean, there's a lot of really cool topics. It's more of a high level, more directed to policy, not a lot of technical stuff. So if you all could make your reservations and attend, it would be awesome. Would be great for El Paso to show that a lot of people are attending. So that's all I have. If you have any questions or comments.
Mr. Chairman, I just want to commend you for what you've been saying here as a result of attending these conferences, and especially you're looking 25 years and on down the line in terms of what our future transportation needs are going to be. My experience in the Texas legislature now 10 years this year, and including serving on the Senate Transportation Committee, is that we have very powerful lobbies in this state. The highway lobby, the oil and gas lobby, the construction lobby, all of whom are interested in continuing the road building and the promotion of projects that may be inconsistent with some of the things we talked about earlier, what Mr. White raised and others about the importance of looking at alternative transportation, mass transit, bicycle paths, and things of that nature. It's a very difficult uphill battle, as I'm sure you're aware of, in dealing with these strong interests that want to continue perpetuating, the system that we experience today. And I think for us as a community, I would like nothing better than to see El Paso be a leader, take the lead in terms of insisting in our plans, in our projects, on some alternatives to just creating more highways and more vehicular traffic that leads to more pollution, that leads to more deaths in neighborhoods, as we've talked about. So I'm glad that you are looking at those things into the future. There's rapid rail transit that we talked about. Perry wanted to do that and ran into the problems with the property rights folks. And it's a big challenge in this state. But I think as a community, we can lead the way in terms of the decisions that we make. And that's why I think that some of those observations that Mr. White makes are right on the money in terms of how we ought to be thinking about transportation in our region, and especially in our binational region. So we could be the leaders all along the border and across the state, and looking at some of these other alternative means of transportation versus just consistently saying, as a result of population growth, we need more highway lanes, we need more vehicles, we need more pollution, we need more deaths. So I want to thank you for looking into that future and what our needs are going to be.
And again, more the reason to encourage you all to attend some of these big conferences. I mean, if we have the time and the budget to do that, it's time well spent.
Yeah, I've been to that Texas Transportation Forum since I'm on the Senate Transportation Committee, and you're right, it's lots of policy, not the actual nuts and bolts of transportation, but the policy is important. Keep in mind where we are, where we're headed, where we should be heading.
That's it.
That's right. Being no further items.
I'm sorry, I just, separate from Eduardo, if I may, I have a few comments, just update from the New Mexico side.
Well, I don't know, we might have to.
It's small. I try not to laugh, but it's small. I just wanted to give everybody an update. Our legislative session began on Tuesday of this month. It is a 30-day session, so there's going to be a lot of activity taking place. Important for this region is I've already presented to a House and Senate committee regarding shortfalls on our budget and the importance of funding some of our needs. And just so you all know, our number one priority is the 404 corridor. It's a $60 million corridor, basically would get us from I-10 to the Texas state line. We're about $17.5 million short of funding that entire corridor, but it looks very positive that we'll get that funded. So with that being said, our expectation is probably within the next 3 years, we'll have at least all the 404 4 lanes with positive separation, which will eliminate the head-on collisions and the fatalities that we've been having. New Mexico 213, which runs to the Texas state line, will be in design. It is currently in our STIP, but our expectation is that will be sometime in 2023. But important for this region, 404 will be 4 lane, hopefully within the next 5 years or so.
Coincide with the other schedule, right?
Yeah, no, definitely, for the Borderland Expressway. Yeah, and that piece of the Borderland Expressway, the New Mexico piece is farther ahead in terms of funding.
Well, and again, from our perspective, Mr. Chair, we move forward not because of the Borderland Expressway. I mean, the timing is fitting, but because of the fatalities. I mean, just within the past month, we had another head-on fatality on that corridor. So for us, it was safety money that we pursued, not necessarily anything else. We are going to pursue an application for CMAQ to try to help with that funding. But for us, it wasn't the freight corridor as much as it was the safety accident issue.
Anybody have anything further on Friday? We're going to motions to adjourn. We were, yeah.